What is up, my beautiful gemstones? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing mysterious deaths of people involved in ufology. If you've been subscribed to or just hanging around my channel for a while, or if you know me personally, you know I am a sucker when it comes to the topic of mysterious deaths, especially ones that could somehow be linked to extraterrestrials and or their crafts in any way, shape, or form. I've talked a lot about the possibility of those connections being made, oftentimes using specific cases as examples, but I never came across any information that connected cases with possible UFO phenomenon before, aside from, like in my own mind and in the discussions we've had and many live streams and chats on my channel. Well, I have found some pretty compelling cases of people who were mysteriously killed or found dead after having some sort of interactions with UFOs or aliens in general, and it seems now like I'm not the only one who was making those connections after all. I've only recently been able to get to the research, and it turns out that for decades now, and possibly going back even longer, there have been more than a few people in the field of ufology or on the periphery of it who could very well have been unalived for what they knew. People who allegedly got way too close to the truth of what's going on out there, and with that particular type of phenomenon for the comfort of some people or beings in very high places. I've discussed already the theory of the men in black that I really most believe in, with that being that they could possibly be asleep assassins who are somehow and randomly activated, usually in the middle of the night, and sent on their dastardly missions, only to not remember much of it the next day or in the following weeks. Now, I promise, gemstones, since I've covered that theory several months ago, I have been researching and trying to compile enough to bring that alone to a video here on this channel, and I hope to be able to do that very soon. In the meantime, though, what if the men in black are more than what they seem to be? Not meaning they might be hybrids or ETs themselves, but meaning that maybe they're strange and oftentimes seemingly innocuous threats to people who have seen or otherwise know too much aren't always just threats and at times have actually been carried out. Would we ever really know if that were the case? I'm going to go with probably not. Undoubtedly, as far as I can tell, this is one of the most controversial angles in the world of ufology as a whole right now. With that being said, this is a topic that should definitely be examined carefully and delivered with a lot of care. That's your warning right there, that sometimes we may not want to go snooping around in the dark corners of the internet or in the infinite places across galaxies, realms, and through dimensions, because we might then be the ones who are uncovering too much. It might end up being us. However, you all know me, and you know the things I like to discuss and dig into on my channel, and this one, when I came across it, was just too much for me to have been able to pass up. I think the following cases are definitely worth at least discussing, even if at the end of the day, in one way or another, we don't have any more definitive answers than when we first started. Lock your doors, turn down the lights, and make sure there's no one lurking outside of your house, because we're about to jump right in. So I wanted to start with a somewhat relatively known case of the first Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal. At Bethesda Naval Hospital in Maryland on May 22nd, 1949, James allegedly jumped from the 16th floor out his room window. According to a lot of rumor and a ton of speculation, it was James's knowledge of top secret information regarding UFOs and extraterrestrials themselves that led to him having the mental breakdown, as we called it in the 40s, in the first place, that led him into that particular hospital and hospital room. According to most ufologists, James Forrestal had a ton of very private, very valued information about ETs and their crafts, and he couldn't handle it in general, let alone being able to keep all of the sudden and newly gained information a secret from everyone around him. So he couldn't handle knowing it, let alone keeping it all to himself and not being able to talk about it. Don't blame him one bit. He became overwhelmed, and that's one of the things about this case that we can be completely and totally sure of. Dude was overwhelmed. A few months before his untimely and very tragic death, he told a close friend of his, a man named William O. Douglas, who also happened to be Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. I think that's William O. Douglas, not O. Douglas. I don't know. So James Forrestal said to William O. Douglas, quote, "Bill, something awful is about to happen to me," end quote. Turns out he was right, and something truly awful really did happen to him, and only a few months after he uttered those words to his buddy. Could it be that James Forrester's death was one of, if not the first ever, to have been a murder committed on someone high up in government in order to cover up what they knew. Could be. Officially, it said he jumped, but to many people, even those who have done extensive investigations into this case, they believe he could have also been pushed. There's a lot more to this particular case than I would have been able to fit here, but I will make sure to do an entire video on it because it is really mysterious and super sinister. For now, though, let's keep looking at other cases of possible cover-ups of mysterious deaths of people who knew too much. Our next case is a writer whose name was Danny Casolaro. Between the late 80s and the early 90s, Danny was very vocal about being on the trail of something or someone he referred to as the octopus. He said it was a worldwide organization with tentacles literally everywhere that manipulated events, made murders look like the person had done it to themselves, and he even said that this organization was setting us all up to be under the thumb of some sort of new world order in the coming decades and years, meaning right about now. Casolaro also claimed that this octopus organization also had some of its tentacles in the field of ufology. On August 1st, 1991, in a room at the Sheraton Inn in Martinsburg, West Virginia, the body of an unknown man was found unalive in the shower. By all appearances, the man had ended his own life. Deep gashes were found in both his wrists, and without anyone around to help him out, as he was allegedly traveling alone, he was just left there to bleed out. Now, if someone were unaliving themselves, I guess that would make sense. They wouldn't want to be anywhere where anyone could get to them and offer any sort of life-saving assistance, but that's just it, isn't it, guys? It wraps up just a little too neat for a man who had his whole life ahead of him and who truly thought he was onto something absolutely remarkable and groundbreaking. Hotel staff figured out who he was within just a few moments of finding him, as he was identified by the person working the front desk of the hotel. He was registered under his real name and was known to be an investigative journalist with a lot of grit who did not want to keep secrets. That's the key here, I think. He refused. Of course, Danny's friends and loved ones were absolutely devastated and shocked at the news of what had happened to him. Obviously, the victim of someone taking their own life isn't the only one who suffers, and often it's those who are left behind to pick up the pieces and who are left with so many questions are victims as well. I agree with that statement wholeheartedly and 100%, but let's take a closer look here. Was his death really done at his own hands? It's said that only conspiracy theorists look at this clear-cut case of self-unaliving and think it to be something else, but I'm really not sure about that at all. What brought most people into it, myself included, was the UFO angle to the whole thing. Danny said that he had indisputable proof of the existence of the secret group known as the Majestic 12. Side note, that's another video coming soon, guys. I'm already working on it. It's really fascinating. In case you don't know what that is, let me summarize it right here for you. The Majestic 12, also known as MJ12 for short, is only an alleged group still to this day, and many people write it off as conspiracy theorist jargon. For those who do believe in it, they're said to be a top secret committee of government agents, scientists, military leaders, and government officials that was formed under the executive order of President Truman in 1947 to facilitate recovery and investigations into alien spacecrafts. The concept started circulating among the masses when an alleged series of government documents was allegedly leaked and circulated by ufologists way back in 1948. Supposedly, it oversaw all of Area 51 and the wreckages and the alien bodies that were said to have been found on the night of that most infamous crash in the summer of 1947 in Roswell, New Mexico. Just so you guys know, too, the Majestic 12 has been a topic of discussion that has been integral to the field of ufology for decades now, and for so many people who investigate these types of things as well as for a great deal of professionals in the field. The Majestic 12 really is absolutely and 100% real. I don't want to spend too much time talking about this organization in this video, so let's get back to the death of our journalist friend. One thing I will say, though, before leaving this completely up in the air, is that just as many people believe meaning the Majestic 12, just some more smoke and mirror information put out into the general public by government officials themselves in order to further confuse the Roswell incident. Let me know where you stand on that in the comments, please, if you already have an opinion. So mainly people are saying like the Majestic 12 aren't real and that the government not conspiracy theorists, is who put the information about them out there in order to further make people who talk about the Roswell incident as though it were some sort of alien craft or crash, look even more crazy. You know, oh yeah, aliens. Oh, and now a secret organization. Yeah, that's sounds legit. I'm not sure about that. I believe that they're absolutely real. I don't believe that it's government made up or conspiracy theorist made up. So Danny said that he had undeniable evidence and proof that the Majestic 12 did exist, and he wasn't planning on keeping it to himself or being quiet about it either. By early 1991, he could barely contain himself, and for good reason. He wanted to be and was excited and adamant about being the one to publicly reveal the existence of the octopus. However, his death in August of that same year ensured that at the very least, he wouldn't be the one to put that information out there. As it stands right now, in October of 2023, where I'm filming this video and y'all will more than likely be watching it, we still don't have any evidence or definitive proof about the Majestic 12 one way or another. So if this was done to him and for those reasons, it was really effective. While his death certainly looked like he had done it himself, there were some very valid and solid reason as to why that may not have been the case. It's said by everyone who knew him that he was not experiencing any sort of overwhelming sadness or depression and was in fact excited about his findings and about his life in general. It's actually being said, and it's been said, that it was actually the exact opposite of anything like that, with people saying all of the new leads he was investigating were invigorating and re-energizing him, as well as his being in positive spirits about his quest to bring the entity that he called the octopus, its activities and motivations, and any and all new information about it to the public's attention directly. Personally, he was going to expose some very high up people in the government, and he wasn't going to back down. So let's talk about July of 1947 and what happened briefly in the desert in Roswell, New Mexico. Miriam Bush was someone who knew everything that happened and what really went down on that night and then the days and weeks afterwards. It's said, in fact, that she knew too much and that she more than likely paid for that information with her very life. So I just want to set the record straight here because I'm always seeing Miriam being described as a nurse who worked at the military hospital at the Roswell Army Airfield, but that was not the case, guys. She was not a nurse. She was actually an executive secretary at that same facility. I know it seems like a small distinction, and though I did bring it up in part to lend more respect to her memory, it is actually a very important detail that is so often overlooked. With the actual position she held there, she would have had access to and been in a position to view firsthand any and all parts and pieces of the wreckage as it was secretly brought onto the base right into where she worked on that night, including any possible mangled bodies, alien or otherwise, that went through there as well. Whereas a nurse probably would not have been privy to that information. It's no secret that immediately following the Roswell crash, Miriam was said to have become extremely paranoid and lived in constant fear for her life, given, of course, the many reiterations of threats and warnings to keep silent that were given to her and everyone else who was there that night, or subsequently involved to any real degree for that matter. She was specifically told by very high-ranking military and government officials not to ever mention to anyone what she had been made privy to that night, but she somewhat couldn't help herself and ended up sharing the information she had with several members of her family. Of course, she in turn warned the people she had told that they should never tell anyone what she had told them, but you know how that goes, and someone, somewhere, and at some time, was bound to let something big slip. The Roswell incident ended up dominating Miriam's life, and she ended up really going off the rails because of it. She felt so paranoid and outside of herself, it said she entered into a loveless marriage, and by the end of it all, she had become a full-blown raging alcoholic. I mean, in my opinion, that is very understandable if you really think about it. So imagine that Roswell is real, because it is. It really did happen, and most of us in this community already know that, and knowing about it way back then, but not being able to discuss it for fear of losing your life. But then you can't keep it in anymore, and you discuss it anyways and tell your family and those in your life you love the most and that are closest to you, only to worry then about them dying because of what you told them. Imagine that. And it sounds like a lot, and for some, like Miriam, it sounds like it ended up being way too much. Miriam's life came to a shocking and very suspicious end in the 1980s. Sometime in December of 1989, without telling anyone where she was going or why, and with no one who knew her best knowing she had any plans to do so, she took off on a solo trip to San Jose, California, where she checked into a motel under her sister's name. It was very out of character for her, and her loved ones thought it was really bizarre behavior, just the motel in general, even before what came next. Like, she had never done this before. She didn't just go randomly stay in motels alone. It seems to me like Miriam really was concerned that she was being watched and was more than likely concerned for her family and that they were in danger, and maybe she was just trying to put some distance between herself and the people she told about Roswell. After all, if she had nothing to hide and was merely just trying to get away from the stresses and pressures of her daily life, why wouldn't she just use her own identification or her own name? The day after she checked in, the motel staff went into her room and found Miriam unalive with a plastic bag tied tightly around her neck, with the bag portion over her face, obstructing her ability to breathe normally. She suffocated to death, or she was suffocated to death, one or the other. There were very visible and clear marks on her arms that the staff member who checked her in said they did not notice, and that they definitely would have noticed when she checked in. The authorities said the marks were definitive indicators that a struggle and a scuffle had occurred sometime after she had checked in, and more than likely while the bag was being placed around her face and tied around her neck. Despite ample evidence that she had been murdered, the official cause of death listed on Miriam's death certificate is she took her own life. One of the most controversial books out of the magnitude of them that were written in the 1950s about ufology and extraterrestrials was written in 1955 by a very well-known and highly regarded astronomer, archaeologist, and UFO researcher named Morris K. Jessup. Yes, a lot of y'all have heard that name. Morris was known for his unorthodox theories and was one of the first people to publicly talk about an ancient astronaut theory and alternative history. He wrote quite a few books about those things and more, but there was one book that may have led to the loss of his life. The name of the book was The Case for the UFO, and it was a detailed study of the presumption of theoretical power sources for unidentified flying objects. So, it was about what possibly made them fly. It talks about the aerial feats and hovering at incredible heights, as well as how witnesses claimed they simply came to complete stops in the sky without making any noise at all, and all sorts of things like that. Mr. Jessup believed the answers to the questions he was posing in the book had something to do with what we call here on Earth gravity. Actually, what Morris Jessup called it was anti-gravity. Guys, he had to have been onto something, because it didn't take long after publishing that book before all sorts of government officials were on his back, haunting and hounding him about his work. The people who were really on his back, though, more so than anyone else, were officials from the United States Navy. It wasn't just the Navy in general, but its special weapons offices. It was obvious that someone in the Navy and someone very high up was either interested in or concerned with Mr. Jessup's theories and conclusion. Perhaps it was a little bit of both. Could it be that someone high up was concerned that perhaps he had or would stumble onto the same tech that was being tested out by our own United States government? Some say it was actually that UFOs were our own, and that the military was more than happy for us, the citizens of this country, to perceive those crafts as alien ships from somewhere else so that they could go ahead with, and so that it would be easier for them to fabricate and orchestrate some sort of alien invasion, which would of course have been a complete fabrication. So what this theory was basically saying is using the Navy as, who it was, because the Navy and the special weapons offices of the Navy seemed to be who were on his case, on his back, and hounding him the most, actually allow us, the general populace, to believe that unidentified flying objects belong to aliens, extraterrestrials, and creatures, beings from other worlds, planets, realms, dimensions, galaxies, etc., when in all actuality, it's actually our ships, like our Navy's ships, our military ships, and that they're perfectly fine with allowing us to think and believe this, because someday they're going to orchestrate some kind of hostile takeover or something like that for either enslavement or, I don't know. I really didn't follow down this rabbit hole because I was trying to stay focused on Jessup, but guys, that is ridiculously interesting, and I actually do want to look more into it if you guys have any more information on that theory. that UFOs are actually our own military government aircrafts, let me know. Email me or leave something in the comments if you would. I'd really appreciate it. So another thing I just want to mention here real quickly about Mr. Jessup is that he was well known as well for his work on the highly classified, at least at that point, Philadelphia experiment, which, as many of us are aware, purportedly was an experiment done by the government and the United States Naval Intelligence to try and make a whole naval ship invisible. Just like Miriam Bush, Morris Jessup became incredibly worried, also to the point of paranoia that he was being spied on by certain elements within the United States government. With all of this going on, it seems as though 1958 was a very hard year for Morris. His wife had recently left him. His most recent book, the one I just mentioned, that was causing all of the other troubles, actually wasn't selling well, and he had been involved in a major car accident as well. The accident left him seriously injured. In the early evening of April 20th, 1959, Morris Jessup's lifeless body was found in his car, parked in the Matheson Hammock Park in Miami, Florida. There was a hose pipe fixed to the exhaust, which ran through the driver's side window, and the engine was still running. So he was unalive by effects of carbon monoxide poisoning, and a man named John Good was the one who found him, and John worked at the park. He called the police, and they arrived very quickly. The official cause of death for Morris K. Jessup was that he had taken his own life, but of course not everyone in the field of ufology agreed with that at the time, but there was nothing anyone could do about it, especially not at that point in time in our country. With that being said, there were a few investigators that worked on the case of his death that said to them it seemed, quote, just a bit too professionally done, end quote. In the days leading up to his death, Jessup had been harassed almost nonstop with strange phone calls to his home, and possibly they were going through to other places as well, like his office, and really anywhere that he would show up, these phone calls would start happening. He also had just met with a mysterious man known as Carlos Allende, who was the man who had written the letter that was absolutely instrumental to bringing the Philadelphia experiment to the knowledge of the general public. An extremely strange detail in this case, or another one, and the one that I think is the most strange, is that no autopsy was ever done on Morris's body. Now, not only is that strange and suspicious, it's also illegal in the state of Florida for there to be a death without any autopsy performed regardless of anything. There must be one done, and that was the case in the 50s as well. Let's move into a few honorable mentions here, starting with a string of deaths in the 80s that are extremely suspicious, due mainly to the fact that they were all the result of oddly fast-acting and fast-moving cancers. So we've discussed Ivan T. Sanderson here on this channel more than a few times throughout multiple videos. Ivan was a cryptozoologist and UFO aficionado who was taken out in such a way. Next is Dr. Alan J. Hynek, who was once a major consultant and investigator for Project Blue Book. He's a very famous fixture in the history of ufology as well. In 1986, Hynek was admitted to the hospital for prostate surgery, but he would never leave because it turned out he unknowingly had a very vicious brain tumor that instead ended his life. According to his family and those who knew him best, in the days leading up to his surgery, he was very upset and seemed somewhat frightened of and about some new research he had collected regarding UFOs. 2 years later, in 1988, a notable female investigative radio host named Mae Brussel died as well of fast-acting cancer in California, and it seemed to have come on and out of nowhere. She was known as a conspiracy theorist and hosted a radio show where she took no prisoners regarding the subjects of all types of things, including ufology, government cover-ups, secret programs, and the like. The name of her show was Dialogue Conspiracy. It was later renamed to The World Watchers International. The strange and suspicious deaths continued right into the 90s, and one of those was the death of astronaut Deke Slayton. Slayton was scheduled to come forward with inside knowledge and personal experiences with UFOs publicly, and that wasn't really something that was done quite often back then without the internet and all, but he never got the chance to say anything about any of it because he conveniently also died of a very aggressive cancer just before he was slated to do so as well. In 1994, an investigator for MUFON, a woman named Ann Livingston, died of an extremely aggressive form of ovarian cancer too. It's interesting and somewhat spooky to note here that she died exactly 2 years after she claimed publicly to have been harassed by men in black who were ghoulish, pale, and faceless. Also in 1994, there was another death of a MUFON investigator, and his name was Ron Johnson. Ron was the deputy director of investigations for the agency, and he would die under rather bizarre circumstances just after attending a slideshow presentation in Austin, Texas. So once the lights were turned back on, as with slideshows, there needs to be darkness and the lights cause interference with viewers being able to clearly see the screen, he was found slumped over in his seat. Blood was coming out of his nose, pouring out, and his face had taken on a weird, odd, purplish blue color. In 1996, there was Carla Turner and her strange death. She was an author on ufology, and she died of aggressive breast cancer. She had written at least 3 books, as far as I could find, about controversial topics regarding UFOs, extraterrestrials, and ufology in general. In 1999, Jim Keith, an author of several books on ufology and connected conspiracies, was having surgery on his leg. He had broken his leg, and the surgery was normal and very routine. However, a blood clot during the surgery stopped his heart, and he died too. Moving on into the millennium, there was the case of Ron Bonds, who was a prolific author of unexplained phenomenon and who died in April of 2001 of an extremely rare type of food poisoning bacteria that almost never leads to death. For some reason, though, it turned deadly for Ron. Prominent UFO researcher Paul Vijay died in 2009. It was February, and 44-year-old Paul's body was found bobbing around in the sea near Portsmouth, Hants, and he had left a series of strange and cryptic passwords behind on his phone that no one has ever been able to figure out to this day. Authorities, of course, officially deemed his death as having come at his own hands, or that it may have been an accident, but his friends and loved ones were absolutely adamant that Paul would never have done such a thing, and he hadn't ever mentioned it or suffered from any form of mental illness or anything like that. The coroner, who was unable to determine cause and manner of death in Paul's case and whether or not it was his doing, stated, quote, "I cannot say beyond reasonable doubt that yes, Paul has taken his own life. The only person who could tell us what was going on in his mind and what happened that night is sadly not here to tell us," end quote. So one of the weirdest cases of all, at least in my humble opinion, is the last case we're going to go over and discuss here today. It involves Max Spears, who was a UFO expert and conspiracy theorist. He was well known for diving into government cover-ups, and in July of 2016, he was visiting a friend in Warsaw, Poland. He was also there because he had planned on attending a conference on UFOs and conspiracy theories that was being held in the area at that time. On July 16th, Max's friend found him on the sofa in his living room. He was unresponsive and had puked up some sort of, quote, viscous black liquid, end quote. There were more than a few suspicious details surrounding his death, with the first being a text message he sent to his mother right before he died. It said, quote, "Your boy's in trouble. If anything happens to me, investigate," end quote. Once again, there was never an official autopsy performed on the body, and Max was by all accounts a healthy young man with no previous or underlying health issues at all. In my opinion, that makes the fact he allegedly just died out of nowhere and for seemingly no reason there on his friend's sofa that day very, very odd and strange indeed, and also highly unlikely. In fact, almost nothing was mentioned about the investigation into his death until 3 years later in 2019. At that time, investigators said his death had been caused by, quote, drug use and pneumonia, end quote. Max's mother said of what happened to her son in the following investigation, quote, Max was a very fit man who was in good health, and yet he apparently just died suddenly on a sofa. All I have is a death certificate from the Polish authorities that it was from natural causes, but no post-mortem was done, so how can they tell that? They're also refusing to release any paperwork about it to me because, absurdly, I don't have his written permission. Apparently, he had not suffered any obvious physical injuries, but he could have been slowly poisoned, which is why the results of toxicology tests from his post-mortem are so important, end quote. So, once again, and completely as usual, those of us in this community and who work in some of these fields, as well as the general public and family members of the deceased, are all left to wonder what really happened to all of these people and so many more I didn't even mention who were making great strides in uncovering and possibly exposing secrets about UFOs, ufology, and all sorts of things about the government, etc. To wonder what really happened and whether or not it's possible that all of these people either took their own lives, died of sudden and randomly rare cancers, some other mundane things, or if they were completely removed from the whole equation by some sort of nefarious underbelly that didn't want them talking or finding out any more about whatever it was they were looking into in the first place. Yes, skeptics, we know people die, but honestly, there isn't a single case here that I covered that makes any sense at all. How is it that we can plainly see these cases are shady, but the so-called authorities investigating them don't see that and are so very quick to make light of it, act like it's no big deal, and even blame the deceased by accusing them of having taken their own lives? It really does make me wonder what in the world is going on and if any of us are actually safe. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed hanging out with me, if you enjoyed hanging out with each other in the premiere. Spread the love by sharing this video. Subscribe if you haven't already, please. I am almost at 3,000 and I am so super duper excited about that. I'm doing a huge spiritual power box giveaway once I hit 3,000, but you have to be subscribed in order to win it, and there'll be more information on that as the time progresses and the time comes. So the schedule is still a little bit messed up, but I have found a lot more time in my day starting today, and I'm really excited about that. So I should be able to get some more live streams in there. For right now, it's Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, Ghost Dragon ZW, just hanging out, chillaxing and chatting and doing that nighttime vibe type thing. Just giving y'all something to do on a Wednesday. Every other Thursday, you should find Miss Lara, Miss Paranormal Pixie, at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and she'll go for as long as she wants. Those are conversations with Lara. Every other Friday and every other Saturday, it'll either be Ghost Dragon ZW with replays at midnight Eastern Time, so he'll be replaying my old videos, or Live Intuitive Oracle starting at 7:15 p.m. Eastern. So one will be on Friday and Saturday, alternating weeks. The week you are watching this, Live Intuitive Oracle will be on a Friday. I took off last week, but I don't think I'm going to have to do that again because, like I said, I found this really amazing system. I'll talk to y'all about it in stream. Check out the description box for some important links. Ways to donate to the channel. Donations are so incredibly important. They keep my equipment working. They keep me better able to make better videos as time goes on. They pay me for my time and for my work. They help me research, and, you know, the information's in the description box if y'all are able to provide or give donations. PayPal, Cash App, Amazon wish list gift link if you just want to send me a gift. There is all sorts of stuff on that wish list gift link. Also, links to Amazon for the Kindle and paperback for all 3 of my books: Missing the Fae Theory, Encounters with Evil, 101 True and Terrifying Stories, and Shadow Entities, Sleep Paralysis and Beyond. I am almost done with Danger at Your Doorstep, Black-Eyed Kid Encounters. I still haven't tweaked the title of the book about black-eyed kids that I am working on, but I'm hoping for a Halloween release, or at least just a little while after. As y'all can probably tell, I am completely and totally tongue-tied right now, and just having a great day, and really happy to be back filming videos. I missed 1 week, and I feel like it's been forever since I've been able to do this with y'all, and I just love it. I love my job, and I love being able to do this, and I'm super excited about this video specifically and particularly. Guys, be kind to each other. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. If nobody told you today, I believe in you. You're amazing. You're perfectly imperfect. You are just the way you are made to be. And don't let anyone bring you down, make you feel less than, tell you you can't do something. If nobody told you today, I believe in you. You got this. You can do this. You're a light worker. You're an empath. You are fantastic and amazing and beautiful. Always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and I'll see you guys next time.